centering silence, quite powerful. Isla Kaminsky talks about the wise silence and how silence can speak to us. This day is Mother's Day. All around the United States, people are celebrating whether it is your first or your 91st Mother's Day, whether you had an amazing relationship with your mother or a more difficult one. This is a time to think about all of those who have been mothers in our lives. One of the things that's amazing about our tradition, I have a prop, is that we are quite old as Unitarian Universalists. This congregation is from 1852 in our ancestry, and we have survived a blizzard, 3 homes, and 1 move from a different neighborhood to this one. And with that history, we encounter changing voices over time. But one voice that echoed in Unitarian times in centuries past and into our own is the writer and author Julia Ward Howe, who was a mother to 6 children, 2 of whom died when they were young. 3 daughters went on to become writers and playwrights and actors. 1 son went on to become a scientist. And she said that her life almost began at 50. She had had a very difficult marriage, even though she had visions of liberation and was a Unitarian. Her home life was very restrictive. But after 50, she began to become more and more a public figure. And in the 1870s, she wrote a proclamation, which was one of the early manifestations of Mother's Day, and is respected in our tradition and held in our hymn book to call us to a vision of motherhood as healing and transformation, both in our own lives and in the wider world. I invite all of us to grab that famous gray hymn book, and I will tell you a secret, that in the back of the hymn book, there are actually readings, poems, meditations. And if you go to about here in the back, look for number 573, reading 573. And Ruth is going to lead us in this responsive reading, this responsive meditation. Ruth will begin the proclamation from Julia Ward Howe from a century past, 2 centuries past. And then I invite us in the room to respond to Ruth with the words in italics. A Mother's Day proclamation.
Arise then, women of this day.
Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears.
Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by an irrelevant agency.
Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage, for caresses and applause.
Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience.
We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injury.
From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm.
The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out our dishonor, or violence indicate possession.
As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now lead all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of counsel.
Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead.
Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as the means whereby the great human family can live in peace.
And each bearing after her own time the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of
Now is the time in our service where we take an offering. We know it is the gifts of all of us that help support our ability to thrive and gather. For those attending in person, we will pass the collection plate. Please use the envelope you'll find in the pew. Write your name and indicate if your offering is part of your pledge or if it is a donation. The music is Prairie Spring by Jay Unger and Molly Mason, Eric and John Michaels.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. In our tradition, we do our best to honor bread and roses. It's an older expression that talks about caring for one another, the material needs, the food we need, and roses, symbols of imagination, friendship, and hope. One way that we do that in our gathered community is through our Social Justice Committee, which has reconvened over the last winter and spring and has been a partner seeking ways we can work with other congregations on the island to support immigration rights and a new immigrant legal clinic on the island and other ways that we can engage in deeper work. I'm very happy to introduce Chelsea Smith, who is going to give us an update on a survey about ways our congregation can get involved. Chelsea, thank you so much.
Hello again. All right. So we have been meeting these past couple of months, as our Reverend was just saying, and a few weeks ago we put out a survey to members of the congregation trying to gauge interest in social justice concerns that our community might have, and specifically seeing if y'all would be interested in reaching people in the broader community with us, and where you are all out to do that. So the survey is still open, and I think we're going to leave it open for about another week. If you did not get a chance to fill this out already, we're going to send out this email one more time and close it up next week, so everybody still has a chance to have some input in this. And for those of you who had filled it out, we've got about 20 people, and we're really, really happy with our responses. So I wanted to say thank you, guys. So yeah, thank you.
There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that allows the community to connect with one another and in the wider neighborhoods and across this island. In that spirit of bread and roses unfolding, we sing a beautiful hymn, As We Come Marching, Marching, which is number 109 in our gray hymn book, has echoes of the era of the suffrage movement and the struggle for peace and justice. Please rise in body or spirit.
As we come marching, marching in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, a thousand workshops gray, are touched with all the radiance that sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. As we come marching, marching, we battle tooth for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our life shall not be sweetened from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient song of bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days, the rising of the women means the rising of the drudge and idler, tend the toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
As Unitarian Universalists, we are part of a global community of faith. And while each country and each region has different expressions of our beautiful religious tradition of interfaith spirituality, justice, and hope, one ritual is shared on almost every continent, and it is the flower ceremony. The flower ceremony is a testament within Unitarian Universalism that though our spiritual paths are all distinct and unique to us personally, we can gather in one common room, share moments of reflection, meditation, prayer, song, and through that common experience go out in the world deeper and committed to love, hope, and transformation. This ritual and this prayer, which we're about to offer, is over 100 years old and comes to us from the Unitarians in Prague. It was first created by Norbert Čapek and his wife Maja, who were dedicated Unitarians who in the 1920s helped found and cultivate the Prague Unitarian congregation. It ultimately became one of the largest Unitarian congregations in the entire world. And this ritual was a way to offer symbolic connection, a shared pathway for people who were liberal Christians and atheists and Reformed Jews, all these different people in one common space trying to figure out how do we make more love in this world. And what's poignant is that this flower ceremony was created in a time of rising authoritarianism, violence, and hatred. And even the founders of that congregation suffered greatly. Norbert himself was arrested by the Nazi government and did not survive the war. But his wife kept the story going. She was able to escape to the US after the war. And in Brooklyn and in Cambridge, she convinced those congregations to try a flower ceremony. And from there, it spread at ministers' gatherings, on and on. Conversations began with the English Unitarians and the Indian Unitarians, and then now it's a rite and ritual that is shared across the world, and a reminder that love is more powerful than death. So, I hope that you have a flower with you that you received when you came in from wonderful Marge. And if you did not, you can run to the back right now, or gently walk, and choose a flower. And in a moment, I will invite you to lift those flowers up, and I will dedicate them with the words of Norbert Čapek. And you may lift those flowers of all different colors and types. Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these, thy messengers of fellowship and love. May these flowers remind us, amidst diversity of knowledge and gifts, to be one in desire and affection and devotion to the holy will. May they also remind us of the value of comradeship, of doing and sharing alike. May we cherish friendship as one of thy most precious gifts. May we not let awareness of another's talents discourage us or sully our relationship. But may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do the work, thy work in this world. Our flowers are blessed. And I invite you to take a moment, look around at all the flowers everyone's holding. We are connected. We are one. May it be so. Thank you so much. So happy Mother's Day. May you have bread and roses. May you have food to eat and time to create. May you be full in body and spirit. And I want to send a greeting to everyone in this room, to everyone watching online, that we are connected. We are part of an unfolding, gathered community. We're thinking of you. I want to invite us on a journey today with space for bread and roses. Reflect a little bit on the roots of Mother's Day that we just heard from Julia Ward's proclamation. Then hear a story about my mother, a very wise human being. And then meditate a little bit on what we might learn from times ancient and modern. I thought a lot about what does it mean to celebrate Mother's Day today, which comes to us as a 19th century holiday during our complicated 21st century, a time when, based on conversations I've had with many parents, many people are fearful of what will happen to their children because of the politics and our culture. I've spoken with mothers worried about bullying, trying to navigate survival and political activism. I've spoken of parents fearful to travel to states with bans on reproductive health care or restrictions on access and support for trans youth. I've spoken with mothers who are deeply committed to progressive religious ideals and profoundly dismayed at the seeming incapacity of so many of our progressive organizations, even the religious community, to really feel like we're fully responding to the crisis of the moment. But to me, it seems like that is how we engage with this holiday, thinking about the call of promise and reality and discerning how do we work for bread and roses, a full meal and care of the imagination, time to eat and time to create. In our country, Mother's Day, at least in one trajectory, goes back to that proclamation from Julia Ward Howe, back before the flu pandemic of 1918, all the way back to 1870. In 1870, the different boroughs of this city had not yet united to form the great city of New York. Staten Island was on its own. The island of Manhattan had a population just under 1 million. Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall was overseeing patronage and corruption in City Hall, nothing like today at all. And construction on the then incomplete Brooklyn Bridge had just begun the year before in 1869. It was a time of mourning in the aftermath of the war, the Civil War, but also profound possibility and transformation. So much was unknown. A new society could be created on the ashes of the evil one which had preceded it. It was a complicated time, one of profound promise and possibility. Organizations like the Red Cross and Howard University and Morehouse College were just coming into being. violence of the wars in the plains, the assault on Native Americans in the West was underway. And this country was in another stage of its still ongoing fight to decide if it really believed in equality of all people. In that tumult, in that context, Julia Ward Howe was approaching 60, penned a proclamation, which was spread through magazines, saying, "Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all we have been able to teach them. We will be too tender to those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice." She knew what was happening in the plains. She saw what was happening in Europe. And she wanted to feel like, after all that had been done for justice and peace, that a different type of society could be made. And that's an unfinished vision, but it's one that still speaks to us. One that calls us even to reflect in our personal lives. Are we working towards that unfolding bread and roses? My mother, I feel tremendous appreciation for, because during a time in my life when I left my home birth tradition of Catholicism, she accompanied me on that journey. And I know not everybody does. Literally across the street from the Catholic Church where my first communion was the Unitarian Church. So on Sundays, when she could go across the street, she supported me in making a choice to try to understand how to live out values that I was wrestling with. And to me, that accompaniment speaks to love in the hard times that we all go through. Bread and Roses is about these transformational aspirations in society, and yet so much is how we enact them in our personal lives. Mothers do so much work in American life, so much work, and our society doesn't make it easy. We don't have guaranteed paid leave for mothers. We have struggles with just getting equal access under the law. People constantly have to fight with local businesses to make the case for care and protection. There's a cartoonist who, Emma Lowe, who says, Emma Lowe is a cartoonist who has written a strip called Mental Load, and you can look it up. Mental Load speaks about all the unspoken tasks that so many mothers do, from managing chores to preparing food, to advocating at school board meetings, to dressing, to gift buying, to brushing the clothes, to laundering, to caring about everything. And Emma contends the mental load is permanent and exhausting work, and it's often invisible. She talks about research that says that women are still devoting 25 more times to chores than men. 25 more times, and this was in 2022. And she says the call of the transformation that's needed is for couples to start from the beginning and divide up recurrent and non-critical household tasks. And she says this is the gateway to transformation, because we can't get to a world where power is distributed equitably and in a way that is healing if even in our own home lives, the power is unequal, even in the 21st century. And that ties back to Julia Ward Howe's vision, because she almost couldn't give the world what she wanted. Her husband was a devout Unitarian, was involved in philanthropic causes for transforming the world. And if you looked at that part of his legacy, you'd say, what an amazing human being. But in his home life, he was tyrannical. And she, who contributed much to the arts and culture of this nation, almost didn't have the chance to do it. Because people can proclaim the great vision of transformation for others, but then not practice it in our own homes. And I lift this up to say that we need to find ways to make time for that self-reflection, to think about, do our aspirations match our practice, not just in our outside advocacy, but also in how we organize our lives, in how we practice and care for one another. It's also deeply necessary to think about the symbols that we lift up as spiritual people. Who do we honor? At the beginning of this service, we heard a beautiful rendition of Ave Maria from the Michael siblings. And that speaks to us from a tradition of a Jewish peasant woman who challenged imperial forces. And her story, the story of Mary, often is used by some who try to portray traditional and exclusive and domineering understandings of the role of women in American society, but it need not be so. In our own hymn book, you can find a reading, a translation of the Magnificat, the Song of Mary from the Gospel of Luke. And in our translation, it says, "There is strength in her arms. It shatters the brittle pride of wealth. It levels the clay-foot thrones of tyrants. She upholds the forgotten and the scared. Hunger, both body and soul, will be filled. Riches will be no more rewarded. The Holy One cleaves to those who keep faith." The images that we lift up are deeply important. And as religious liberals, we need to be attentive to honor the spectrum of voices of how the sacred can be seen. In this fall, I spoke with a young Unitarian Universalist woman who is just a middle schooler, just on the brink of high school, and she thought God was a man. And she'd been going to Unitarian Universalist congregations her whole life. And she had sung the song Spirit of Life, and she had heard the beautiful prayers from the Kashi Unitarians about Mother Spirit and Father Spirit. But that conversation crystallized to me that no matter what holy, beautiful work we lift up in this room, there's so much energy in the wider world planting stories and images of what is good, and that our kids need support and accompaniment. And that our vision of bread and roses, our vision of disruption, our vision of full bellies and time for imagination and love and joy, we can cultivate that. We can honor the women in our lives who have done so much and sacrificed so much. But especially, we need to think about how we are living and act in ways that make the gap between what we espouse and how we organize more real. I feel like, particularly in this moment in American life, when we see more and more of an anger, a nationalism, a violence in rhetoric that echoes times past, it is necessary to counter those who say that God is a man, that only male preachers have a right to speak. That's wrong and demonic. And as men, as religious men who affirm a liberal tradition, we need to be particularly sensitive and intentional to disrupt patterns in our own lives to show up. And as all people, we need to figure out how to accompany those who are wrestling with the vision to transform but need support. I believe that this faith can give us clues on a journey to healing wholeness and to bread and roses. But I know that together we have to cultivate the spaces to encounter people, to offer pathways, to offer reminders that the old stories they may have learned are not the only way to speak about love, justice, truth, and peace. And that through honoring our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, all those who over generations cultivated spaces like these, we can create a dynamic of healing and resistance and transformation. Bread and Roses is a beautiful vision of a world transformed. And Bread and Roses is a challenge and a reminder in our personal lives to consider how we are being attentive to the material needs of those around us and also attentive to the space for imagination, healing, and transformation. I ask us to remember our ancestors, to think about that at one point in time, there will be another news article, or at least a blog post, about this tradition. And we get to decide what that next column is about for this moment in time. May we seek bread. May we care for roses. May we honor all of those who have mothered us. And may we be blessed by their memory. May it be so.
Please join us in singing hymn number 118, This Little Light of Mine, in your gray hymnal.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I invite you to join me in extinguishing our chalice. You can find the affirmation in our order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth,
The warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts
until we are together again.
The writer Bell Hooks reminds us, whenever we heal old wounds, we strengthen community. Doing this, we engage in loving practice. That love lays the foundation for the constructive building of community with strangers. The love we make in community stays with us wherever we go. With this knowledge as our guide, we make any place we go where we return to love. May it be so. want to thank all of you for being present. I want to thank our special guest musicians today, the Michael brothers. You're all welcome to join in hospitality in the room next door. And later today, we will be having both a spiritual care circle and a Getting Connected workshop, which will take place in the library if you're interested to learn more about our tradition. So sending care, sending light, and remember, love shows up everywhere and in everyone. May it be so.